Actually, I was really excited that I see Kuna has been presented the KubeSphere very well and give a good presentation around the Kubernetes multi-cluster management and the basic project introduction to KubeSphere. Actually, all of those presentations are presented from a Kubernetes practitioner or a IT administrator, since all of those things are around Kubernetes infrastructure management with a cluster management. So I will give some live demos and introductions from a developer perspective. So I will show you how to deploy an application across multiple Kubernetes cluster and how to build observability such as logging, monitoring, and auditing logs around Kubernetes. So before we get started, I think I need to give any history and basic introduction about KubeSphere. For example, why we initiate and funded this project around 4 years ago, and what will be added in this project in the next releases, and the roadmap of KubeSphere. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the QA box, okay? Since Kuna has introduced KubeSphere, so I will skip it. And KubeSphere is also available on Civo Marketplace that Kuna has shared it already. I think this is a issue that reported from KubeSphere KSAPS server. So I will help you to solve it after this meeting. Since you have to troubleshoot it while the KS installer logs, so you can try to retrieve the logs while the kubectl command and to see what's going on there. So you might need to troubleshoot it by yourself right now, but I will help you to solve it after this meeting.
I believe one more thing to mention is that there's an awesome Slack channel for KubeSphere as well that you can join. So make sure you do that. You can find the link on the website, or I can share it here as well. And you can ask all your questions post-meeting over there as well.
Yeah, sure. Actually, this is a general architecture of KubeSphere. It has provided some typical typical features such as service mesh, CI/CD, application lifecycle management, observability, and security and authentication management. KubeSphere can be installed on the existing Kubernetes cluster, for example, Civo Kubernetes cluster on your own premises Kubernetes cluster. By the way, if you are a new beginner for Kubernetes, it also helps you to provision a brand new Kubernetes cluster via KubeKey, an open source cluster management and installation tool that open sourced by our team. So you can install KubeSphere on any kinds of infrastructures, including Kubernetes or VM virtual machines or bare metals. Okay. This is an overview of the ecosystem tool that have been included in KubeSphere. All of those software or cloud native tools can be enabled and installed automatically by KubeSphere KS installer. So you just need to modify the the class configuration that Kuna has introduced before. And going forward, we will simplify this process and make all of this in a graphical user panel. So going forward, all of those add-ons could be installed from the application store in KubeSphere. Right now, you can enable them via the kubectl commands or the class configuration. Yeah. So from the top layer, you can see from the application management to the underlying orchestration and container engine, all of those ecosystem tools could be installed and enabled in KubeSphere. Actually, this is the roadmap of KubeSphere. This project has been funded around 4 years ago, and it has published the first release in 2018. So right now we have released around 10 versions. So it has been a mature project and has been adopted by thousands of enterprises in China and all around the world, especially in some financial enterprises such as banking and insurance enterprises. I think the most remarkable release is 4.0 that we are going to release in the second half of this year. In this release, we are going to provide an open and pluggable framework. We can also call an architecture. Yeah, this is an important release till now, since it has provided an open architecture that allows third-party applications can be integrated, and all of those software could be developed by yourself or extended by any teams. The most important thing is that all of those software can follow with a consistent framework, and all of those user experience and user interface are looking quite consistent with KubeSphere itself. So all of those user experience are consistent with KubeSphere. And we are also developing an open source serverless, or we say fast management platform, which name is Open Function, that has also accepted by CNCF as a CNCF Sandbox project last week. So we're also planning to integrate the serverless management platform in KubeSphere at 4.0. Before we initiated this project, we have did a lot of investigation works, and we also see there are a lot of existing tools that are solving those problems. As for the challenges and pain points that when people using Kubernetes in production, we can easily find the complexity has been the biggest problem that when we adopt Kubernetes. This is the survey from the CNCF survey 2020. So as you can find that complexity occupies the highest portion in this diagram. So before we funded this project, we want to make developers' life much easier, especially for the developers who want to deploy applications on Kubernetes. So when it talks to the mission and the vision of KubeSphere, we want to decrease the learning curve of Kubernetes and making the application deployment and management quite easier. Apart from that, I think the security, storage, and monitoring has also been huge problems among Kubernetes management. So it has provided some features such as observability, including alerting, monitoring, and logging in some releases. Okay, let's go ahead. This is also some pain points that we see when people leveraging Kubernetes in production. So I'm not sure, have everyone watched the movie, and do you know the Jackie Chan, a famous Chinese Kung Fu superstar? He has also been quite famous around the world. And this is a classical emotion from Jackie Chan. So I think people may feel the same feeling when they manage Kubernetes cluster, especially a large-scale Kubernetes cluster in production. They might have the challenges around high learning curve, Kubernetes cluster bootstrapping, application lifecycle management, as well as security and multi-tenancy. So in order to solve all of those challenges, we funded this project and added some features and grow it with our users and contributors. Already we see there are a lot of existing tools such as Kibana, Elasticsearch, Kubernetes Dashboard, Istio, Harbor and SonarQube that have been solved those different kinds of issues in Kubernetes. For example, Elasticsearch ELK stack has been the de facto of Kubernetes logging management in this area for many years. And Prometheus and Grafana has been the most popular monitoring tool in this domain. Actually, we don't redevelop those tools in KubeSphere. We just integrate it and make it much easy of use in KubeSphere. All right. Let me give a general comparison to Kubernetes and KubeSphere. I would say KubeSphere stands on the huge giant of Kubernetes and some other ecosystem tools, but KubeSphere has a lot of strengths and enhancements based on Kubernetes. For example, as for the installation, I have mentioned that we have an open source tool, KubeKey, which is developed based on kubeadmin. It has a command line tool that you can use to create a fresh Kubernetes cluster with KubeSphere via a single command. Yeah, so it has a extremely simple user experience. So it also provides both online and offline installation methods. So as for the user interface, I think this part has been acknowledged by a lot of users since it has a good and very neat user interface that provides Wizard Web UI. As for the multi-tenancy and security, KubeSphere has been developed a concept and it has designed a multi-tenancy management framework based on Kubernetes, which is workspace that I will demonstrate it later. It is also compatible with the existing Kubernetes RBAC policies, and it also provides network policy management and OAuth and LDAP integration. As for the application management, CI/CD, and service mesh, those features are not provided by Kubernetes natively. So KubeSphere are also included all of those features out of the box. So you just need to enable them via the kubectl command or the web interface. Apart from KubeSphere itself, we are also developing and polishing some ecosystem tools, and all of them have been accepted by the upstream community and CNCF. As for the OpenELB, formerly named as PortLB, which is an open source load balancer designed for bare metal and on-premises Kubernetes cluster. So this project implemented by physical switches and uses BGP and ECMP to achieve the best performance and high availability for exposing the Kubernetes services in the on-premises cluster. If you are running your Kubernetes cluster on public cloud, such as Civo cloud, you will not need this project. But when you are going to deploy your cluster in your data center or in, for example, your local machines, OpenELB is quite useful. I see there is a new question. Any special provision in KubeSphere in
There's one,
yeah. GitLab instance. Yeah, we are going to support GitLab as the underlying engine for KubeSphere DevOps. And so far, we have supported Argo CD in the next release. I think going forward, GitLab could be an optional CI/CD engine for KubeSphere. This is a good requirement. I think it has been already listed in our roadmap. Okay. As for the Fluent-based operator, now it has been renamed to Fluent operator. It is used for Kubernetes. It is used for deployment of Fluent-based and Fluentd. It has provided the lifecycle management for Fluent-based and Fluentd to famous open source logging management tool in the CNCF. And it also provides great flexibility in building logging layer based on Fluentbit and Fluentd. And we're also showing the general architecture and the walkthrough of Fluent operator later. I think KubeKey has been mentioned by myself a lot of times, so you can check out this project from KubeSphere.io, and you can find the project's introduction and GitHub from our website. Okay, KubeEye is aiming to detect various problems on Kubernetes. It is an troubleshooting tool for you to debug the application misconfiguration and unhealthy cluster components and node problems. So if you want to troubleshoot your security policies and your cluster health, you can check it via KubeEye. And OpenFunction has also mentioned earlier, it is an CNCF sandbox project aiming to provide the function as a service in based on Kubernetes. So you just need to write your source code and functions. So OpenFunction will help you to build the images from source code, and finally it will build the easy to run Docker images or any container compatible images in Kubernetes. So you don't need to consider about the underlying runtime and the infrastructure. Maybe this project will be included in the following webinars with Kuna. Yeah. Okay. As we mentioned earlier, and Kuna has also demonstrated the multi-class management, I would like to explain why the multi-class management matters and why you need it. Similarly, we have also did some investigations around the multi-cluster management before. We have drawn the conclusion that around more than 70% of users that have adopted that have multiple Kubernetes clusters in their production, they might use those Kubernetes clusters for different purposes. For example, they want to separate different applications and environments. For example, some teams has development, testing, or the production cluster. So this is a good use case when people want to isolate different environments for different applications. Apart from that, we also see the multi-cloud management has also been a new trend for those enterprises, especially for those biggest enterprises, since they don't want to be locked in by those cloud providers. And they also want to provide the high availability among different cloud providers. So if one cloud provider down, they have optional and redundancy for the applications. So it can be scaling to other cloud providers quite easily. Apart from the multi-cloud and isolation environment, we also see especially in the big company, we have different teams to use a single Kubernetes cluster or multiple Kubernetes cluster, and we have different teams such as testing, DevOps, and IT administrators teams. So they want to grant different permissions and different resources to different teams and members. So considering business as isolation, multi-tenancy and security have been considered in this kind of scenario. And last but not least, the geographic redundancy has also been considered in this kind of scenario. So especially in the financial industry, they have to consider and make sure their application are active, and it can be accessed all the time. So that means those teams have to provide their applications across multidimensional high availability across different regions available zones, and different Kubernetes clusters. We always see this kind of requirements among the industries such as banking, insurance, and finance, as well as the live stream and the online shopping industry. Yeah. So according to all of those requirements and pain points from Kubernetes multi-cluster management, we added the multi-cluster management feature in KubeSphere, and now it has support unified resource management, application distribution, cross-cluster CI/CD in KubeSphere. So whatever you are using, AWS, Civo Cloud, or you are managing your Kubernetes cluster in your local machine and data center, you can use KubeSphere as an unified control plane to import all of those Kubernetes cluster in KubeSphere and manage them with ease. It allows you to propagate your applications across different Kubernetes cluster and multi-cloud. So I will show you a quite simple demo from a developer perspective. I will deploy an web application across Civo Cloud, across Civo Kubernetes cluster, and among 2 different Kubernetes clusters. Okay, as Kuna has mentioned before, KubeSphere multi-cluster management is built on the Kubernetes Federation. We can also call it KubeFed. And this is Kubernetes Federation v2 in KubeSphere. So it has host cluster and member cluster. So all of those authentications and multi-tenancy management has been redesigned and refactored in KubeSphere. So it has provided a quite ease of use control plane for users and IT administrators. You don't need to learn about the basic concepts of Kubernetes Federation. So what is federated resources and how to manage them with yourself. So all of those resources have been integrated and simplified in KubeSphere. So the general architecture are shown as this diagram. So you can create a workspace and grant the permission to different Kubernetes cluster and invite different teams and members to the platform and different Kubernetes cluster. Yeah, you can invite collaborators to join your Kubernetes cluster and grant some permissions such as deploy applications and application lifecycle management. This diagram has also been demonstrated by Kuna at the beginning of this webinar, so I will not deep dive into it. So before we showing the live demo of Kubernetes multi-cluster and application deployment, I will demonstrate how the multi-tenancy works in KubeSphere. Actually, the workspace is the smallest unit in KubeSphere multi-tenancy mechanism. So it is used to manage multiple Kubernetes namespace. As you know, workspace is not involved in the native Kubernetes cluster. So this is a concept in KubeSphere, which is used to manage different namespace and different Kubernetes clusters, and also associated with the different roles and members. So you can create a workspace before you deploy your application to multiple Kubernetes clusters. This is also a very detailed documentation in KubeSphere website. So if you want to know more about the Kubernetes multi-tenancy in KubeSphere, you can go through this documentation and see the biggest challenges in Kubernetes multi-tenancy and how we design the concept of Kubernetes multi-tenancy in KubeSphere. Actually, we did a lot of works in the among the Kubernetes logistic management and the physical isolation for the multi-tenancy management. So you can go through this documentation and to see what has been illustrated in this document. Actually, we also did some work among the authentication and authorization around the multi-tenancy management, as we need to manage different teams and members across different workspaces and different Kubernetes clusters. So if you want to deep dive into it, you can have a look at this diagram. It has the explanation to KS console and the KS API server and how they work with the authentication and authorization. Okay, let's jump into the live demo. I think talking is cheap. Let's show you a live demo of how to create a workspace and how to deploy an multi-cluster application to multiple Kubernetes cluster on Civo Cloud. All right, as we have already initiated 2 Kubernetes clusters on Civo Kubernetes Cloud, and Kuna has also demonstrated this part already at the beginning of this webinar, so I will not demonstrate it again. So if you want to try it yourself, you just need to register a new account on Civo Cloud. So I will jump into the control plane of KubeSphere and show you how to deploy an application among them. Okay. Yeah, we got a KubeSphere 3.2. This is the latest version of KubeSphere. And in this month, we are going to release a new version for KubeSphere, which has integrated Argo CD in its DevOps system. So for this KubeSphere container platform, we have already imported 2 clusters. The first one is host cluster, which is a control plane of the multi-cluster management. So the second one is member cluster, which allows you to deploy applications on the member cluster, and this cluster is used to run your business workloads. Okay, let's get started. So before we deploy an application among them, we can create a workspace, which is the basic concept of KubeSphere multi-tenancy management.
Maybe like brief just about multi-tenancy as well for folks who may be asking. See a few folks.
Okay.
Who are,
yeah, we can waiting for a while. I thought Kuna might mix the multi-tenancy and workspace design in KubeSphere in your first episode. So I will deep dive into this part in this webinar.
Awesome, let's do it.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, I think this workspace design is not quite obvious in the current release. So we will polish it and make it much more obvious and easy to use in the next release. Yeah.
I believe we can move forward.
Okay. Assume there is any no issues or questions about the Kubernetes multi-tenancy in KubeSphere. I could give an example for this design. So imagine you have different teams and departments in your company. For example, you have DevOps teams and testing and for example, and development teams. Yeah. They want to manage their they want to manage their resources among different namespace or different CI/CD pipelines. So, but they just want to make sure their resources are only visible to their teams internally. So in this kind of scenario, you can create workspace and share resources with different teams, and you can invite different departments or different organizations in different workspaces in KubeSphere. So KubeSphere is designed for multi-tenant management. So this is quite important for you to understand. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new workspace. We can call it Civo webinar. Civo Cloud. Yeah, we can associate this workspace and add these two Kubernetes clusters within this workspace. All right, as we have explained before, under the workspace, we can create multiple Kubernetes namespaces. We have abstracted into projects in KubeSphere. And we can also create the DevOps project, which is the Jenkins pipeline that you can create it here. Yeah. You can also import your Helm repository here. So you can add your Helm repository and it will be displayed in the App Store and application template. So in this demo, I will show you how to create a multi-cluster project and deploy a multi-cluster application among two Kubernetes cluster. You can call it application apps testing. And we can associate it with two Kubernetes cluster, the host and the member cluster. Click OK. So now we have created this multi-cluster project. And next, as a developer, maybe you want to deploy your application in this project and distribute it to multiple Kubernetes clusters. So we can create a application here. We can call it applications testing. So here we can create a stateless service and associate it with this project. Application testing, give it a name. And next, we can actually here, we can choose to scale it to multiple replicas in order to make sure it is high availability among different Kubernetes cluster. So let's give 3 here and give 2 in member cluster. Actually, you can point a container image here. So as we have already developed an web application and it calls cluster, I remember the name is cluster demo. Not sure if it is. Actually, we can use here to search this image, class demo. Wait 4 seconds. Yeah, actually, we developed a web app and the name is class demo. You can choose it and use v1. I think it could be searched in this. Okay, it comes, and we can use the default port for this web application. All right, we can save it and go ahead This is the persistent volume settings. Since this is a stateless application, so you can skip it. And you can skip it. So as for the environment variables, we want to give an environment variable here. For example, we can call it DB cluster, which will be displayed on the web application web interface. You can call it host. As for the member cluster, we can do these similar steps. DB cluster, and we can call it member. So this value will be displayed on the web application. So I will show you later. Okay, everything looks fine. So you can save it and create this application. Actually, we can define the router. Actually, this is the Kubernetes ingress in our project. So we can give a domain name, which can be accessed in our browser or outside the cluster. For example, we can give apps. We can give a host apps testing.io, and we can associate with the application testing service. And click OK. And we can do the similar step for the member cluster. You can give it a domain name, member, and apps testing.io. This is similar with the last step. We can click OK to save it, and finally click Create button to complete it. So at this point, you will find those two applications have been running on these two Kubernetes clusters, and it is still updating and putting the Docker image in those different Kubernetes clusters. So please wait for seconds. So yeah, when it displays the green status, that means it has been successfully running on those Kubernetes cluster. Yeah. So we can see we can join to the service detail page. So you will find the applications have been propagated with different replicas on these two Kubernetes clusters. The first one is host cluster. It has been run 3 replicas on it, and the second one is member cluster with 2 replicas on it. So in this way, your application have been achieved with the high availability natively. So you don't need to worry about if one application is down in the host cluster, since it will be rescheduled to the second cluster. So at this point, if you want to access it outside the cluster, so you can try it with the internal domain name. We can also call it DNS name. You can also access it via your browser. So before we access it, we can verify it on our web kubectl, and to see if this service could be accessed internally. Okay, try to access it with its port. Yeah, we can see the HTML but I think this is not quite intuitive in the web kubectl, so we can try to access it while the domain name in our browser. So let's give it, you can try it host.appstesting.io. Wait for a while. I think it should be come. Actually, maybe this. this domain has been blocked by my network provider, by my internet provider. I'm not sure. Okay. Unfortunately, I think this domain name is not certified by the certified authority. So I think this has been, the domain name has been blocked by my internet provider. Actually, we can try to access it while my Kubernetes cluster itself. We can query it. So if you want to access this domain, you might need to add the DNS resolution in your etc configuration. So I don't have, I have not configured it from my side. So if you want to access it, you can try to configure it in your local machine. Okay, we can go to the routers and to see if the external IP address works. Yeah, actually, I can try to configure it from my local machine. Please wait for seconds. Oops. I think I missed a character here. All right, I think this demo works successfully. As you can see, the web application has been deployed in my host cluster. As you can see, the variable that we defined in the previous step, you can see the host displayed on our web application. This is defined in the application deployment step. Yeah. So similarly, it could be accessed in the member/member.applications-testing.io, since I didn't configure it in my local machine. So if you want to access it, you can try it in your desktop. This is quite similar with the host cluster management. Yeah. So yeah, we have completed the first demo of multi-cluster application deployment. Yeah, and we have propagated the replicas of a web application to 2 different Kubernetes cluster on Civo Cloud. So if you want to try it, there's also an document on our website. You can check out it on KubeSphere.io. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the to my slide. Yeah, actually, I have demonstrated how to deploy a multi-cluster application on multiple Kubernetes clusters, which shows the final results in our browser. So go ahead. I will discover and walk you through the observability within KubeSphere. As you know, from different multi-dimensional resources such as cluster, node, application, pod, containers, namespaces, and Kubernetes components. All of those resources will omit the Kubernetes logs and metrics every day. So if you want to troubleshoot and debug what's going on and what happens in those components or applications, you might need to build your own observability system based on your Kubernetes. So you might retrieve the metrics logs, events, audit logs, and alert messages for those indicators. There are also some mature tools that you can use to manage and retrieve those logs and data among Kubernetes clusters. For example, Prometheus, Fluentbit, Elasticsearch, Firebit, and Fluentd. I think the biggest challenge is how to collect those metrics and logs and data in a single Kubernetes cluster or even multiple Kubernetes cluster and display them and make it visible to different teams. This is the biggest challenge when you want to build multi-tenancy among Kubernetes cluster. Yeah. So according to this challenge and pain point, we are developing and providing the feature, the observability feature on Kubernetes. Yeah. As the monitoring part is quite obvious and easy to understand, and Kuna has also showcased the cluster monitoring in KubeSphere. So I will focus and concentrate on the logging management. Before we introducing logging, I think we might need to consider how the logging generates and where they come from. Actually, we have different types of logging in Kubernetes and our application every day. For example, as for the application logs, it might have generated from the Docker containers and our application. So it will generate the files, the file type of logging and data, and it will be shipped to the send out and send arrow or right into a file. So in this way, we can collect those data from the file or from the send out with a logging tool such as Fluentd and Fluentbit. As for the Kubernetes components itself, it has multiple components such as kube API server, kube scheduler, and kube proxy. It also generates a huge amount of logs every day. So in case you want to troubleshoot what's going on and happens in your Kubernetes cluster, you might need to collect those Kubernetes component logs and store them in your Elasticsearch. So this is also important to monitoring and retrieve those logs in a storage. Yeah. Apart from the Kubernetes itself, actually, if you want to trace and look back, who did which actions in your cluster and when did this happens, you might need to look back at Kubernetes events and auditing logs. So every Kubernetes event, such as scheduling a pod or deleting a pod, or you create a new deployment, all of those actions and events will be recorded by the Kubernetes API server. Yeah. These logs help you to trace back the Kubernetes resources state, and the Kubernetes audit logs will help you to trace what happens in your Kubernetes cluster and who did which actions in your Kubernetes cluster. This is quite important when your enterprise is doing the compliance and security check. Okay, this is also an easy to understand blog on our website, so you can check out it from this domain. Okay, yeah, we see how it's working, automatically fixed. Oh, that's fortunate, and I see that this guest has fixed this issue and it is automatically fixed. I think maybe your cluster is still under installing at the beginning of this webinar. So I think this installation has just completed. You can enjoy your journey with KubeSphere.
It does take a few minutes. That's why you can check the logs.
Yeah, Yeah, actually, we are simplify the installation process and makes the installation time much short, since it relies on the Ansible scripts. So we are removing the Ansible from our installation script and the process. So I think it could be refined in the future release. Okay. When it comes to the challenges of logging in Kubernetes, actually we see the logs come from different data sources and different data formats. For example, we have logs generated from our system and Kubernetes cluster, and it has also generated from the, for example, our Apache web server or our browser. Yeah. All of those logs are in different data formats and different resources. And for example, different teams have also requirements on the log collection. For example, they want to make the log collector much lightweight and make the data collecting in a secure and resilient way. Finally, if you want to store your logs and data in different destinations, so it has multiple outputs. For example, we can store our data and logs in MongoDB, Hadoop, Elasticsearch, S3, and so on. So all of those challenges have been quite commonly in enterprises, especially in the real use cases. So according to those challenges, we developed an open source Fluent operator, which is used to facilitate the management of FluentD and FluentBit. As you know, FluentBit and FluentD are quite popular in the logging management domain, which is used to collect and forward the logs from different sources to different destinations. But you know, there are a lot of challenges and shortcomings in FluentBit and FluentD. For example, the dynamic reloading is not supported in FluentBit. If you want to manage if you want to modify your configuration via config map, you need to restart the FluentBit pod every time. So Fluent operator allows you to dynamically manage your FluentBit and FluentD without reloading and restart your pod. Actually, Fluent operator also provide the management and rich plugins with FluentBit and FluentD. Meantime, KubeSphere also integrates Fluent operator in its logging system. So I will show you how to search the logs via KubeSphere logging system. By the way, Fluent operator has also been accepted by the upstream Fluent community. So you will find this project from the Fluent organization in GitHub. Yeah. Okay, this is the KubeSphere logging system. It has provided the log searching console and the log collectors that it enables you to add new log collectors such as Elasticsearch, Kafka, FluentD, and S3. This is the logging console of KubeSphere, as you can see from the KubeSphere container platform. Where's my console? So yeah, we have a toolbox that integrates all of those features among the observability management. For example, log search, event search, and audit log search. So you can click log search and drill into it. You can pick up a period and to see what's going on there. So you will find the logs have been stored in the Elasticsearch, and you can trace from the historical logs, and you can drill into it and to see what's going on in this part and in this project. You can also drill into its paths and to see the container logs. Yeah. This is quite useful when you want to trace back and to see what's going on in your application and workloads. Okay, let's go ahead. Actually, we have demonstrated the KubeSphere logging system. Actually, how we implemented this feature within KubeSphere, we use Flumbit running on each node with demo set, Flumbit demo set, and which used to retrieve the logs from the standard out in each node. And then the front operator will retrieve those logs and send them to the Elasticsearch. And while the KubeSphere logging console and through the KubeSphere API server, all of those logs will be visualized and showing on KubeSphere console, which is similar to the Kibana, but you don't need to build the Kibana by yourself since it has been integrated into KubeSphere console. Okay, this is the cluster status monitoring. Similarly, you can also create your own Kubernetes monitoring dashboard and your application monitoring dashboard by yourself, since it has a custom monitoring dashboard here. But due to the time is limited, I will not show you how to monitor your application via KubeSphere. So you can check out the documentation on our website. This is the event console. Let me open an event console for, yeah. This is the historical events that have been collected by KubeSphere, and we can choose which cluster to watch. Actually, you can search the events via different messages, workspace, or project. Similarly, we can pick a period and jump into it. So yeah, we find some warning events that are omitted by the kube system. So we can jump into it. And you can see the detailed metadata that are omitted from this pod. So you will find the source event is from the kubelet component, and you can see the type is warning. So you can, you might need to troubleshoot the kubelet and to see what's going on there. And it also promotes the error message that the readiness prop is failed. So this is quite useful if you find that there is some troublesome or misconfiguration in your Kubernetes cluster. So you might need to troubleshoot it if you are a IT administrator. Similarly, I think the outing log is also the same with the previous steps. So you can click here and you can search it while the keyword or while different resources types. Yeah, I think this is quite similar with the Kubernetes event search. So I will not showing it again. Yeah. So you will find the auditing log source and who did this action in your project. For example, you will find the administrator that has updated the KubeSphere project and its gateway in the system workspace at this time. So I think this is quite useful for you to do the compliance and trace who did which actions in your cluster.